S.S.S. Pinchas, Tov Shin Pei Gimel. I first want to give a compliment to everybody that's here. I mean, tonight we literally just finished the Tainus of Nesivos Shalom Pinchas about an hour ago. And truth be told, I called Rabbi Brule yesterday, and I told him, I said, I guess I'll be saying the shir from, I'll do it in my office, do it at home, and we'll record because it's going to be right after Nesivos Shalom Pinchas. He told me, you don't know the Bikkur Cholim guys. Absolutely not. They're all going to be here, and they're going to be here to do that tremendous chesed, get all the food and different things out to the hospitals for Shabbos, and all the medical equipment that has to be taken care of, and the show must go on. So Baruch Hashem, it happens to be that as we, creep toward our 14th anniversary, sometime in the fall time we'll be hitting our 700th year. We're starting to realize that the shir has to continue going on every week. So here we are, and thank you to everybody for the big crowd that's here, so well behaved. And I also want to mention, just a little plug for the Bikkur Cholim kitchen. Everybody finished breaking their fast about a half hour ago, and we have about a 10-course fleischiger dinner here, waiting for everybody. For as soon as we finish the shir, everyone's going to dig in for the delicious toyamel. And the second half of this week's parsha, beginning talks about Pinchas. We know, second half of the parsha, we discuss all the different karbonos that are brought, karbonos of Rosh Chodesh, karbonos of the Yom Tovim. And first we speak about a very familiar parsha that we learn every Rosh Chodesh. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, tzav es bnei Yisrael v'yomarto aleihem es karboni lachni liYishai reach nichoichi tishmeru. We read the psukim that we learn, part of the Torah that we learn every Rosh Chodesh. So the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh asks here, why is the parsha of the karbonos written here in the Torah? If you look in our parsha, right before the parsha of the karbonos, the Torah tells us about Yehoshua ben Nun being appointed as a successor to Moshe Rabbeinu. As we know, Yehoshua ben Nun was going to be the one leading Klal Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael. And the Torah tells us that Yehoshua ben Nun was going to be that person. And right after that, the Torah goes on and tells us about the karbonos. And the biggest question asked the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh is that why are we discussing the karbonos now? They were bringing karbonos for the past 40 years in the Midbar. As you know, the Mishkan was built many years before that, and now it's 40 years later, and Klal Yisrael is already about to go into Eretz Yisrael. As we know, we're in the part of the Torah already where it's just before going into Eretz Yisrael, and Yehoshua was appointed in the 40th year. So why do we wait until now to have the parsha of karbonos in the Torah? So too, the Nesivos Shalom asks, what is the connection between the two inyanim? The fact that they're together in the Torah, the appointment of Yehoshua ben Nun as the successor of Moshe Rabbeinu, who would lead Klal Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael, and now and the parsha of the karbonos. And although I'm sure everybody's thinking and everybody wants to say that we have a principle, as you know, of Ein Mukdam U'Meuchar BaTorah, that the Torah is not necessarily written in any chronological order. It's not written necessarily in the order that things happen, but still, we know that there's still a remez in the Torah. We always have a reason as to why one parsha, if it's out of order, why it would be put in the place that it is. So in order to answer all these things, the Nesivos Shalom tells us that there's a very, very interesting Noam Elimelech from the Rebbe of Meilech, the Chis Yogan Aleinu, in Parshas Noach. Why are we talking about Parshas Noach? You'll see, but before you turn around, we're going to be at Parshas Noach anyway. And the Rebbe of Meilech says like this, that each and every generation, interesting concept, you know, how some of these people thought and saw their world. In every generation, there is a specific mitzvah which Klal Yisrael needs to work on and be misaking during that time period. Every generation has their thing, and their thing that they have to be misaking in the world, a specific mitzvah that needs Mesiras Nefesh during that door. And it's interesting that Noam Elimelech mentions that during his particular lifetime and during his generation, the mitzvah that required Mesiras Nefesh and the mitzvah of that generation was the mitzvah of tzitzis. Very interesting, right? Today we look at it as such a pashut thing. Every 3-year-old gets a pair of tzitzis, put on a pair of tzitzis. Everybody's zoicha baruch Hashem to own their own talis and everything. But in the generation of the Noam Elimelech, he says that the challenge and what they had to overcome and what they had to have Mesiras Nefesh for was the mitzvah of tzitzis. And he points out from the pasuk, why is this in Parshas Noach? The Torah tells us, Noach ish tzaddik, tomim haya b'doiraisav. And we underline here the word b'doiraisav, that Noach was a tzaddik, but one of the main points that we're trying to relay over here is that Noach was a tzaddik who was mekayim the mitzvah that was unique for his time, b'doiraisav, that Noach rose up to the challenge of his generation. And in every generation, it says in Noam Elimelech, it says in Nesivos Shalom from there, that in every generation there's a special siyata d'shmaya in the air, and every generation that Klal Yisrael knows, they know that they need to do, and they need to have Mesiras Nefesh for something, and you see a special siyata d'shmaya in the air for a certain mitzvah, and if you do see that, it's a pretty good indication, says in Nesivos Shalom, that that is the mitzvah, which is the mission of that time. And of course, it gets everybody's mind thinking, what is our challenge? What is the challenge of our generation? What do we see a special siyata d'shmaya for? What do we have to have a Mesiras Nefesh for? So of course, anybody could have different answers for that, but Avada, you see today, what tremendous chesed, tremendous Torah. I'm not sure which point in it would be, because obviously I'm not the Noam Elimelech, and I'm certainly not the Nesivos Shalom either. These people had they were able to take the pulse of the generation and understand what it is. But we see the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Perek Aleph tells us, Al Shloisha Devarim Ha'olam Made. And what are the 3 things that the world stands on? Al Torah, Al Avodah, Al Gemilas Chasadim. The Torah stands on those 3 things. So the Nesivos Shalom tells us that what this lesson is teaching us is that one aspect of each of those 3 things need to be worked on and brought out during each generation. That each generation has a challenge in Torah. Every generation has their challenge in Avodah. And every generation has their challenge where they have to rise up to the occasion for Gemilas Chasadim too. So now we're going to tie this up a little bit. And Nesivos Shalom tells us that the door of Moshe Rabbeinu, the door of the Midbar, the door that was Mekabel the Torah, the door Dea, was a unique generation because obviously they had a tremendous chus that they learned Torah straight from Moshe Rabbeinu for 40 years. No one else is going to get that zechus. To actually have the Rabban Shel Kol Yisrael, the one who received the Torah, went up on our Sinai, they learned the Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu for over 40 years. And we can't really even comprehend the greatness of these people. People mamish that heard what they heard and saw what they saw at Har Sinai. But now, Moshe Rabbeinu was going to give up his position to Yeshua ben Nun. The Torah tells us in our parsha that Yeshua ben Nun was going to lead that generation, but that was going to be a different generation when they went into Eretz Yisrael. Those who entered Eretz Yisrael were different than the Dor who lived the 40 years with Moshe Rabbeinu. And the difference is that by Moshe Rabbeinu, you saw it in front of your eyes. It was, so to speak, spoon-fed. The Torah from Har Sinai was spoon-fed to every year. They saw it. But the generation of Yeshua was going to be the first generation that's going to have to get the Torah through Avodah and Yegiah. They were going to have to work hard. They were going to have to work harder. They're not going to see Moshe Rabbeinu right in front of their eyes. The pasuk in the Navi Yeshua, Perek Chav Dalet, tells us, Vayavoid Yisrael es Hashem kol yemei Yeshua. Vayavoid, that they worked. They had to work. It was different than the Dor of Moshe Rabbeinu. The root of serving Hashem through Avodah, as we say, every generation has their challenge in Torah and Avodah and Gemilas Chasadim. The root of serving Hashem through Avodah, we know, is the Karbonos. The Karbonos are called Avodah. Today we don't have Karbonos, we call Tefillah Avodah. But the Karbonos are the root of Avodah. As we know, the Karban Musaf is the neshama of every Yom Tiv. The Avodah came out through the Karbonos. So right after the appointment of Yeshua, the Torah goes ahead and Davka here tells us about Avodah. Because the appointment of Yeshua was signaling that this generation was going to be different. There was going to be a generation where they're going to have to do the Avodah. They're going to have to work. They're going to have to work harder. So now we understand very well that as soon as the Torah tells us about Yeshua, the next thing in the Torah is the Karbonos, to tell us that this was going to be the challenge of that generation. This was going to be the generation of the Avodah. And what is Avodah? Avodah is Karbonos. They're telling us that those who enter Eretz Yisrael, there'll be a different way of the Avodah. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to have tremendous nachas from their Avodah. Every generation, you don't compare yourself to this generation of the Rishonim, of the Achronim, of people 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, even 50 years ago. Every generation has their way of serving Hashem. And if they do it right, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a lot of nachas from that. As we see, the Torah says, by the beginning of the Karbonos, the Torah says, Ishai, Karboni, Lachmi, Reach Nichoichi. Rabbi Shalom is having Kaviyachol, a lot of pleasure from their Avodah. That Hashem gets a nachas ruach from those who work, on the mitzvah of that generation. And we know that kol ha'osek b'toras oila, someone who's osek in the Torah of an oila, it's ki'ilu hikriv oila. It's as if you were makriv, a carbon oila. Kol ha'osek b'toras chatos, anyone who is osek in the Torah and learning about chatos, ki'ilu hikriv chatos. And during these 3 weeks, now that we're in the Bein HaMetzorim, we need to know that we have to be osek in the Torah of the Karbonos on this week's Parsha, to show us, to teach us, to show Hashem that we want to come back to that day where we're going to bring the Karbonos, where we're going to bring a Nachas Ruach, the Kadosh Baruch Hu. We're going to talk more about the Bein HaMetzorim if Mashiach doesn't come before next week. But we want to know that we need to learn the lesson of the Karbonos. We need to learn the lesson that we have to focus on the Avodah and the work of our generation. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees us working on that, it will be a tremendous nachas ruach for HaKadosh Baruch Hu.